Hi, Saul Muerte here, continuing our journey through Dennis Wheatley's Library of the Occult. For this session, we turn our attention to a novel that often sits in the shadows of the more famous Gothic and occult works, yet quietly exerts a powerful influence of its own. Francis Marion Crawford's The Witch of Prague. First published in 1891, this novel occupies a fascinating crossroads between Gothic romance, psychological horror, and occult speculation. It's a book less concerned with overt shocks than with atmosphere, suggestion, and the slow, inexorable tightening of fate. To understand why The Witch of Prague deserves its place in the library, we must first understand the man who wrote it. Francis Marion Crawford was a prolific and cosmopolitan writer born in Italy to American parents and educated across Europe. The son of sculptor Thomas Crawford, he grew up immersed in art, history, and continental culture, influences that would deeply shape his fiction. Crawford was a writer of immense range. Over his career, he produced historical romances, contemporary novels, travel writing, and some of the finest ghost stories of the late Victorian era. Today, he's perhaps best remembered for short works like The Upper Berth and For the Blood is the Life. Stories that helped define the suggestive style of supernatural fiction later perfected by M.R. James. What sets Crawford apart is his seriousness of intent. Unlike some of his contemporaries who flirted with the occult as fashionable ornamentation, Crawford treated supernatural belief as a genuine psychological and metaphysical force. He was deeply interested in spiritualism, mesmerism, and the unseen mechanisms that govern human behavior, interests that permeate The Witch of Prague. This was a writer who understood that horror does not need to shout, it can whisper, insinuate, and patiently wait. The Witch of Prague unfolds in a carefully realized European setting, steeped in old world mysticism and fatalism. At its center, Zdenka Tobor, a beautiful and enigmatic woman believed to possess supernatural powers, a modern witch whose presence destabilizes everyone who comes into her orbit. Opposite her stands Count Karl Rudolph, a man of science and rationality, whose fascination with Zdenka draws him into a psychological and spiritual struggle he cannot fully comprehend or control. At its core, the novel is not about witchcraft as spectacle, but about power, belief, and obsession. One of Crawford's most striking achievements is his ambiguity. Is Zdenka truly supernatural, or is she a master manipulator, wielding suggestion, charisma, and psychological dominance? Crawford refuses to offer easy answers. Instead, he explores how belief itself can become a weapon, how fear and desire open doors that reason alone cannot close. This places The Witch of Prague firmly with a tradition of occult fiction, where the supernatural exists in a liminal space. Like Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, the horror here is inseparable from perception. The reader is left to decide whether the curse is real, or whether the real danger lies in surrendering one's will. Themes of fatal attraction, loss of agency, and the seductive pull of the irrational run throughout the novel. Zdenka is not merely a witch, she is an embodiment of the fear that civilization, science, and masculinity can be undone by forces they refuse to acknowledge. Written at the end of the 19th century, The Witch of Prague reflects a world in transition. This was an era fascinated by progress and haunted by what progress could not explain. Spiritualism, seances, hypnotism, and occult societies flourished alongside scientific discovery. Crawford taps directly into this tension. His novel suggests that reason is not abolished by the occult, it is tested by it. The witch becomes a symbol of everything that eludes measurement, intuition, desire, irrational belief, and inherited superstition. This psychological approach to horror marks Crawford as a key bridge between Gothic fiction and modern supernatural literature. He anticipates writers who would later focus on monsters and more on erosion of certainty. While The Witch of Prague is not as widely read today as Dracula or Frankenstein, its influence can be felt in subtle but significant ways. Crawford helped establish the quiet supernatural, a mode of horror that privileges atmosphere over action and implication over revelation. This approach would later inform the work of M.R. James, Algernon, Blackwood, and even early cinematic horror, where suggestion proved more unsettling than explicit spectacle. The novel also contributes to the enduring figure of the ambiguous female occultist, neither purely villain nor victim, but a destabilizing force who challenges patriarchal certainty. Zdenka is not punished simply for existing. She unsettles because she cannot be easily categorized. In this sense, Crawford's work prefigures later explorations of psychological domination and seductive horror, from Daphne du Maurier to modern literary Gothic. Within Dennis Wheatley's Library of the Occult, The Witch of Prague occupies a fascinating position, where Crowley's Moonchild leans into ritual magic and cosmic struggle, and Frankenstein interrogates creation and responsibility. Crawford's novel turns inward. Its occultism is intimate, personal, and deeply psychological. This makes it an essential counterpoint within the library. It reminds us that the occult does not always arrive with pentagrams and incantations. Sometimes it arrives as a look, a suggestion, a presence that quietly dismantles certainty. In the pantheon of the library so far, The Witch of Prague stands as one of the most restrained yet intellectually rich entries. A novel that rewards patience and close reading rather than immediate thrills. The Witch of Prague is a novel that lingers. It doesn't demand attention through spectacle. Instead, it seeps into the reader's mind, leaving behind questions rather than answers. Francis Marion Crawford understood that the most frightening thing is not the supernatural itself, but our willingness to believe in it, or to deny it when it stares us in the face. In revisiting the novel today, we're reminded that the occult is not always about what exists beyond the veil. Sometimes it's about what happens when that veil slips inside us, when reason falters and fascination takes hold. As part of the Library of the Occult, The Witch of Prague remains a quietly powerful testament to the enduring power of suggestion, belief, and the unknowable. Thanks for joining me once again in the Library of the Occult. Until next time, I'm your host, Saul Muerte.